Hi, I'm Miriam, president of the Mayshad chapter with Join Mayshad. Today on our show, we have Andrea Wilson-Woods, who is a writer, as well as the CEO and co-founder of Cancer University and the founder of the nonprofit Blue Fairy, the Adrian Wilson Liver Cancer Association. We're going to talk about mental resilience in the digital age. This and more up now on Be Who You Want to Be. Hi, you're watching the Be Who You Want to Be series. I'm Miriam, president of the Mayshad chapter with Join Mayshad, the New York-based company that empowers young women to build their professional and personal networks. Our conversation today is mental resilience in the digital age. We are so excited to be here with the accomplished Andrea Wilson-Woods.
Hi, I'm Rachel, and I'm the VP of that Mayshad chapter. We invite all of our viewers to type their questions to us through the chat box and check us out at joinmayshad.com. We are so grateful to have our speaker today. Hi, Andrea. Welcome.
Hi, thank you for having me.
So we're going to start off with the questions right off the bat. Andrea, you are the CEO and co-founder of Cancer University, a for-profit social benefit digital health company. So to kick off this conversation on the topic of digital health, what is mental resilience and why is it even more important that we build it now in our ever digitizing world?
Mental resilience is having grit, and it's protecting your own mental health. It's not easy to do. It's not easy to do at all. In fact, I posted a video on LinkedIn a while ago that I was very afraid of posting about struggling with depression, which I do, which I think it's 15% of Americans do. But that doesn't mean I'm not mentally resilient. It doesn't mean that I don't have grit. I do. But I have tools that I use to cope with my depression. And so part of being resilient is making sure that you have those tools and find what works for you.
Thank you, Andrea. That's very inspiring, and I'm definitely going to look on LinkedIn later and see what I can find. Additionally, could you just tell us a little bit about your background? What led you to where you are today?
Sure. So when I was 22 years old, I was living in Los Angeles. I had graduated from USC, so I had my degree. And I ended up getting custody of my 8-year-old sister, Adrian. So I became her only parent and her legal guardian. And I raised Adrian all through my 20s. And I look at the two of you, which I assume people can see you, and both of you must be younger than my sister would be today. But anyway, I raised Adrian all through my 20s. And a month after her 15th birthday, she was diagnosed with stage 4 liver cancer. And it was incredibly shocking. The day before, she had been fine. It was devastating. She lived for 147 days before dying from liver cancer. And that changed the whole trajectory of my life. When I was raising Adrian, I was a teacher, but I was also an aspiring actress. And I worked in theater in Los Angeles and television and film. And my entire goal was to get a sitcom by the time she went to college so I could pay for her college. That was my goal. And the following year, I was 30 years old. And I did not know what to do with my life anymore. Everything that had been important to me wasn't important anymore. And I ended up starting a nonprofit dedicated to the type of cancer my sister had, primary liver cancer, also known as hepatocellular carcinoma. And that is how I got into the cancer space. I still have that nonprofit, Blue Fairy, the Adrian Wilson Liver Cancer Association. And from Blue Fairy is how I ended up starting Cancer University about 2 years ago.
Thank you so much for telling us that. So what are some examples of resilience in your own life? I know you've touched a little bit about some of the things you've went through already.
Well, I think when your sister, who is also your child, is diagnosed with a cancer that is terminal, you have to be resilient. And when you are the caregiver of a patient, you can't show the patient just how devastated you are. And I was every single day. You can't burden the patient with your feelings. They have their own feelings to work through. And so one of the ways I dealt with her diagnosis day in and day out as I was taking care of her was I lived in what I would call a very healthy state of denial. It's not that I didn't know what she had. It's not that I didn't realize that it was most likely going to kill her. It was simply that I found a way to handle my emotions, to not show them around her. But I was desperately looking for more support that just didn't exist at that time for parents. There was absolutely nothing for parents whose children had cancer. And that was a real struggle. I think I forgot your question. Oh, others examples of mental resilience. Okay. Also, I think another one was, and I know this isn't true for everybody, but when I was raising Adrian through my 20s, I had a pretty close-knit group of friends. They weren't necessarily all friends with each other, but they were friends with me, and they were there with me through her entire diagnosis. And after Adrian died, I lost all of those friends. Not all at once, but sort of one by one by one. And I only ended one friendship purposely myself. The rest of those friends walked away, and most of them did not tell me why. And losing all of those friendships was almost as devastating as losing Adrian. And that was extremely tough. And I think what you learn as you get older is at the end of the day, you are responsible for you. It's not that you shouldn't have friends or family, but you are responsible for your actions, your words, your emotions, your feelings. You can only control you. And the older I get, the more I embrace that. You have no control over other people's actions. You cannot control how other people feel. So now whenever I get a weird or even a nasty comment on LinkedIn or Facebook or whatever, I just say, thank you for your feedback. I cannot control the way you feel. That's all I say now.
Thank you, Andrea. That's very inspiring and very good advice, actually. Additionally, so you touched on this a little bit on the Blue Fairy, and Adrian Wilson Liver Cancer Association. I was just wondering if you could tell us a little bit more about this and the magnitude that it has grown to be today.
Sure. So Blue Fairy is at bluefairy.org, BLUEFAURY. And Blue Fairy's mission is to prevent, treat, and cure primary liver cancer, specifically hepatocellular carcinoma, through research, education, advocacy. And we have been around now, 17 years. And we started rather small, and it was not my vocation to run this nonprofit. It was my passion. And we had, and still to some degree, had a very shoestring budget for over 10 years. Patients found us. We had our medical advisory board, but no one really knew who we were because liver cancer was not a cancer in this country that people paid attention to, even though it's one of the most common cancers worldwide. And that all changed 5 or 6 years ago when liver cancer was one of the only cancers in the U.S. that was increasing while almost every other cancer was decreasing. And all of a sudden, people start contacting us, and it changed everything. And so we have a much bigger, more national presence. But what I've learned from that is that when you have a big dream or a big goal, or you're working on something, you might not see the rewards of that labor for years, for so many years. And often people ask my advice about starting a nonprofit, and I always say, don't do it. Do not do it. I never would have started a nonprofit if there had been one for my sister's cancer. All I wanted to do was volunteer. I didn't know anything about starting a nonprofit. All I wanted to do was volunteer. I tried to do that. I offered to create a program for another nonprofit that dealt with general liver disease. They weren't interested. And so I only created one because nothing like it existed. So I tell people, do not start a nonprofit. There's plenty of other charities out there if you can do something for them. But if you decide to do it, just, be all in and stick with it, because you might not see, any traction. At least we didn't for a decade. But we hung in there and stayed with it because I knew that we were helping people and I knew that we were serving the patients and caregivers.
Thank you, Andrea. I mean, obviously, we're so young, we can't really talk about our own experiences with, seeing something go from short-term to such a long-term project. So I'm really happy that you shared that with us. You are a prolific writer. Your book, Better Off Bald, A Life in 147 Days, chronicles your sister Adrienne's resilience and battle to survive liver cancer. How did the process of writing change your outlook on resilience, if any?
Well, you guys did your homework. I am so impressed. I think people believe that writing a book about a true life experience is cathartic, and it might be for a lot of people. That was not my experience. Writing the first draft of this book took years, and I would pick it up and put it down again. It was extremely painful to go to that place every single day. I very much wanted people to feel what we felt as we were going through it. And from all the feedback I've gotten from readers now, that's exactly what people say. And it's even too painful for some people to read it. But that's how I wanted people to feel. But in order to do that, in order to write in that way, you have to go back and experience the pain. And so getting through that first draft was very difficult. After that, it was much better. And again, it's back to that sort of long-term goal. I knew one day I was going to get the book published. I started writing the book with no plan, no publisher, nothing in place, just knowing that I wanted people to know my sister's story. I think she's incredibly inspirational, and I believe that she would inspire others, and she has. And that was my whole big why for writing the book to begin with.
Thank you for sharing that, Andrea. I really appreciate that. On your website, I came across like a quote section with all of your favorite quotes, which I really enjoyed. And one of them I stumbled upon was, "Never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. Indeed, it is only the thing that ever has." Could you tell us about how this quote has impacted your life and why you find it to be so inspiring?
Yes, that Margaret Mead is attributed with that quote, and I say attributed because now we never know where quotes come from anymore. But it has always been attributed to her. And Margaret Mead was this very I don't want to say anthropologist, that's not the right word, sort of a sociologist, anthropologist. And I remember reading about her when I was a kid. My mother was always buying me books. I love to read, and she bought me this whole series about women in science. And I remember reading about Margaret Mead, and she was doing things at a time where women were not even in that field. And I think if you go back and look at some of the most successful endeavors, especially in our country and history, whether it's a business or, especially if it's a charity, it starts with a group of people, a small group of people that had this idea, and they wanted to move forward with the idea. And a lot of times people think the idea is totally crazy, or it can't be done, or it's a waste of time, it's a waste of money. And that's why it means so much to me, because I really feel like it's those big ideas that start with a small group of people that really change the world. And we take them for granted. We take everything for granted. But if you go back and look at the history of some of the most famous companies or most famous products, it started with an idea. that someone or a few people had.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you, Andrea. I really love that quote as well. In one of your blogs on your website titled How to Go from Survivor to Thriver, you talk about how even though you've gained several successes at the time obtaining your master's degree, finishing 6 marathons, and founding a nonprofit, you always remain to be in survival mode. Mm-hmm. As you say, surviving is an automatic pilot. How can we convert our survivor skills into skills that allow us to thrive?
Okay, I'm so impressed by the homework you guys did. Wow. I really did. I prided myself on being a survivor. When I was growing up, my mother both my parents actually were incredibly tough. They were both in the military. And then my mother was especially very tough, and she kind of grilled that into me that, you're a survivor, you can survive anything. And I knew that if I could survive my sister's death and overcome my grief, that I could survive anything. But if that is the measure of your existence, that you can survive it, that's too low. That's way too low of a bar. And I didn't understand that for a long time. And I was surviving and I was accomplishing things like you listed, but I wasn't happy. And I certainly wasn't thriving. And one of the most significant decisions I've made in the last 6 years was when I decided to leave Los Angeles. And that was a huge decision because I had never lived anywhere else in my adult life. I'm from the Southeast, but I had never actually lived anywhere else. I moved to LA when I was 18 and I stayed there. All of my memories with my sister in LA, that's where I raised her. That's where she's buried. I couldn't comprehend living somewhere else. I didn't know what it would be like, but I had been miserable in LA for several years. And I finally just one day I'd had enough. I was just done and I had no plan. I was still married at the time, but I just made the decision, I'm leaving, I'm done. And that began a big shift for me from going from surviving to thriving, and how could I actually thrive? And I made that decision in October of 2015. I was gone 2 months later, or 2014, gone 2 months later. And I spent the next year, 2015, really working on me, really just working on myself in a way that I hadn't in a really long time, or maybe never. And I had to figure out that until you love yourself, you are not going to find the right person to love you in terms of a romantic relationship. So I had to figure out if I even liked myself. And so I really started thriving. And that shift, that move, it shifted everything in my life. And don't get me wrong, that first year where I live now in Birmingham, Alabama, was really bad. Like I had so many bad things happen. One after the other. I just threw my hands up and I was like, okay, all right, universe, hello, I'm done. I'm tough. I've got it. I can handle this, but can we please just give me a break? But things got better. They got better.
Thank you, Andrea. That's very inspiring, just to see how you were able to leave everything behind and start basically like a totally new life and outlook. That's definitely very inspirational. So from what I can tell, like a very, very large part of your life has been dedicated to helping people like your sister. How do you think this experience has caused you to think differently about the relationships we share with our family and friends?
Well, specific to helping people with cancer, when you have a cancer diagnosis, you have to surround yourself with people who are supportive, regardless of whether they are related to you. So it's very, very important. And I feel like patients find that out pretty quickly. But outside of having a cancer diagnosis, what I've seen over the years and coaching many, many people is we have a tendency to hold on to people who are not supportive, who are not really the best people to be around or spend time with because they're family or because, well, we've been friends since we were kids. or some kind of obligation that we feel that doesn't actually exist. And we keep people in our lives often for way, way too long. The expiration date on that particular relationship has long since expired, but we keep people in our lives. And so perhaps the one good thing that came out of losing all of those friends is it helped me realize that, and including losing my friend from college, we had been friends for 15 years, that I could make new friends. And maybe the time for those friendships was just over. Maybe it was. And I ended up meeting one of my closest friends in my 40s, and I never thought that would happen.
That's really great, Andrea. Thank you for sharing that. Actually, I've noticed, for people my age, we struggle a lot with staying connected, honestly, and we're using social media a lot, and we're constantly connected digitally, even more so during the COVID pandemic. And the virtual world has become our new normal. I personally am experiencing social media fatigue, and I can attest to my friends are as well. What can we do to feel less fatigued?
Oh, gosh. Yeah, you guys are a different generation because you grew up with this. I don't think this will answer your question, but for example, I don't check my email in the morning, and sometimes people get mad at me. I usually don't check it in the morning. And what I will say is, well, I actually remember a time when there was no email. I remember a time when there was no Facebook. I remember a time when if you wanted to stay connected to someone who didn't live in your neighborhood, let's say, you actually had to pick up the phone and call them. And so if you are experiencing that fatigue, there's always another way to communicate with someone. I remember a time when people actually wrote letters. Imagine that. And I still do that. I still write actual physical thank you cards that you have to put a stamp on. And whenever I do that, I always get a response from someone that goes, wow, like, I can't believe you sent a thank you card. Wow. I mean, just that small little thing. And people are so shocked because it means so much more than an email or a text. So if you are having fatigue, communicate in a different way.
Thank you, Andrea. It's actually funny you say that because when it comes to like emailing our interviewers, thank you, like when we're applying for jobs, sometimes they suggest to write them an email if like you write them a letter, my bad, if you really want to leave an impression, just because it's so like rare now for people to do that. So if you're like very interested in a certain company, sometimes they even recommend to do that now just because it's so unused now. Which is interesting because I love letters, honestly. I wish they were still more around because they're very personal compared to emails.
Yeah.
So speaking off of the COVID pandemic, how do you think COVID has permanently transformed the way that we cope with little to no human interaction?
I hope it hasn't permanently transformed the way. I hope it hasn't. I think the people I'm most concerned about are not people who are your age, but younger. The kids who are not going back to school in the fall. I can't imagine being a parent now at my age would be hard enough, but being a parent, I was in a meeting yesterday, and a few parents, people who are in their late 30s who have small children who are in first grade, and they are just, they don't even know what to do. They're just beside themselves that their kids are not going back to school in person in the fall. And I can't see teaching first graders over Zoom. I don't think that's going to work. And I used to be a teacher. I taught college online as well. I've taught in so many different ways and forms and different ages. And young children, for me, were always the hardest to teach. Zoom isn't going to cut it for small kids. And also this this fear now that these kids see with sort of society and their parents. I mean, I can't imagine growing up and having to wear a mask outside all the time as a small child. I mean, that's going to have a permanent impression on those children. So they are the ones I'm most worried about.
I definitely agree with you. I know so many little kids now that all they do is when they want to do some activity, their parent might hand them a cell phone or something. And it's just very problematic because they're not experiencing life that I or you did when we were children. And it has a really great and grave impact on their brains. So off that topic, you started Cancer U because you wanted to teach cancer patients and caregivers how to turn vulnerability into strength and provide a toolkit to empower themselves to be able to navigate their difficult journey. Could you tell us one or two things that you share with cancer patients about how to turn vulnerability into strength?
Well, a lot of people think they have to accept what is given to them. They think they have to accept the doctor, for example. A lot of times the first doctor you get is completely random, whether it's just a doctor referred by your primary care physician who may not even actually know that provider. They just pick that person off a list. Or in my situation, the way we had our oncologist is he just happened to be the one on call. It wasn't that he was a specialist by any means in my sister's cancer. He wasn't even a specialist in solid tumors. I mean, it made no sense. I hope they've changed that sense. So one, you can interview your doctors. You're allowed to do that, and you should. It's very, very serious, and it's okay to ask them questions. You should be asking them questions. I think younger generations are, my generation, your generation, I think they are more likely to ask questions. But I still know people my age that won't question their doctors with a serious diagnosis. And two, always get a second opinion. You have to get a second opinion. Sometimes a third opinion. I mean, it's so critical. I don't know if you guys have listened to the podcast series, Dr. Death, but this was a guy who went to a great medical school. He was a PhD and an MD. He was a neurosurgeon, and he permanently disabled and killed people in Dallas. And he was highly recommended by so many other doctors. And he was a terrible surgeon. It just turned out he was a really horrible surgeon. He should never have been given a medical license. So you never know.
Thank you, Andrea. That's very interesting. I definitely agree. Getting a second opinion or even a third opinion is always very, very valuable. Outside of your career, I've noticed that you have an abundance of amazing activities, such as running marathons and yoga. How does your career combine with these outside activities to create a more fulfilling life?
Oh, you haven't seen my most recent LinkedIn video where I don't have hobbies. That's what it's called. I don't have hobbies. I don't do marathons anymore. I did. I've done 6 marathons, 1 half marathon. I'm a very, very, I'm not even a runner. I'm like a fast walker, really. Very, very, very slow runner. I do yoga. I do that. I'm a 500-hour certified yoga teacher who doesn't teach yoga, but I do yoga. And I journal and I meditate and I read every day. But for me, those are not hobbies so much as self-care activities. I mean, that's part of what I learned in that year is I really need to take good care of myself. And so those are just daily activities more than anything else. But I have purposely cut back on hobbies to spend more time on my 2 businesses. And that's just a conscious choice that I've made right now at this time. But some of my hobbies I couldn't do right now, even if I wanted to anyway, like go to the movies or go wine tasting, go to the beach. I mean, those would be really difficult to do right now.
Yeah, I definitely agree. There's a lot of difficulties and strains on what we can do now. Hopefully that will be lifted soon. So in terms of social media, Instagram specifically, it can consume our minds to the point we are constantly comparing ourselves to others, even though we're just viewing photos and excess material items. How can we prevent social media from getting in the way of what matters most, even if we may not know what we're truly passionate about yet?
I think you have to limit the amount of time you spend on social media, and both with Instagram and Facebook. I don't know about other platforms, but with both of them, you can put a timer on the app and it'll alert you when you've spent that amount of time. Now, you have to have the willpower and self control to go, okay, I'm done for the day. And so the maximum amount of time I allow myself to spend on Facebook, the app, and Instagram, the app, is 10 minutes per day. Occasionally I go over, but for the most part, I don't want to spend any more time than I have to. Another social media platform, Pinterest. I am not on Pinterest because I know I would love it. I would absolutely love it. I would have a Pinterest board for fashion. I would have a Pinterest board for this, for that, you name it, I would. And I only know that because I used to be a social media manager, and my boss had a Pinterest account that we did specifically for wine. And so I know what Pinterest can be like, but I have, stayed off Pinterest. I have an account just so I claim my name and that was it. But I do not interact on Pinterest at all. And so there is a degree of self-control you have to have. I mean, I know people that to cut themselves off from social media, they have gotten the apps off their phones. And that certainly cuts down the amount of time that you spend on social media, because then you have to go to your tablet or your laptop and actually, go on the web and then get on, the platform. So it's a choice. I think like almost anything, it's a choice.
Thank you, Andrea. It's interesting you say that, because actually last night I set a time limit on my social media apps so that after a certain amount of time has elapsed, it gives me a notification, and then I just hop off immediately, because it's so addicting. You don't realize how long you're using it until you look at the time and you're like, oh my gosh, I've been on scrolling through Instagram for an hour. So I think this will definitely be helpful. Or maybe I should just delete the apps altogether. That might even be more beneficial at this point.
Baby steps.
Yeah, exactly. Going off of your vlog, I saw some information about your career coaching program and that you've touched many lives through there. How does helping to educate others help to inspire you?
Well, they say if you can teach others, that's when you know you have a real skill. That's when you've mastered a skill, if you're able to teach other people that skill. And I don't advertise it much. I still technically have my career coaching program. Now it's primarily by referral only, but I am very proud that I've helped people either change jobs in their current career, or what I really specialize in is helping people take their highly transferable skills and actually changing careers with those skills. And it means a lot to me. I mean, I learn something from every single client. I mean, every single time. I think most coaches do. You just learn a lot about their world and get some insight. And I mean, there's just so many different categories in terms of careers that I've helped my clients in that I would otherwise not be exposed to. I've had a lot of STEM clients. The science, technology, engineering, and math. That is not my field at all, but I can help them. And I've learned a lot from them just because, I've had to dive into their careers and better understand them. That's great. I mean, I love learning. So.
That's awesome. So this question is a bit off course what you just talked about, but how can we identify if we need a break from something for our mental well-being?
This is where you have to be very in touch with your own emotions and pay attention to how things make you feel. Some people recommend keeping a journal of your emotions, your feelings. I I think that's hard for a lot of people. I think it's actually easier to keep a food journal than it is to keep a journal specifically of your emotions. But you have to pay attention to what triggers you. And then again, you have to be willing to do something about it. And I think that's the hardest part, is a lot of people know what gives them anxiety, or a lot of people know what might make them more depressed. But knowing and actually doing something about it are two totally different things.
I definitely agree with you. I see so many people just like knowing what the issue is, but not doing anything about it. So I think that's something, in our day and age that we need to really like learn about and understand how we can motivate people to just become a better version of themselves.
Yeah. Or they numb that pain, right? They numb that pain with drugs, with alcohol, whatever. They numb that pain in some way, shape, or form. And we do have a tendency in Western society to treat symptoms instead of figuring out what the actual problem is. And I think that's getting better in medicine just overall. But if you're just treating the symptoms and not figuring out what's actually causing the problem, then you're never going to get better.
Thank you, Andrea. This question relates to a bit to something we touched on already, but even though social media has its downfalls and it can be very addicting, it also has its benefits as well. So we still are going to continue to use it. And that being said, how much consumption of media is too much consumption? Like, where do we draw the line?
Well, I think that's different for everyone. I mean, people who work in media are going to consume a lot more of it than someone like me. I know for me, it's not so much the quantity, it's about the quality and also the time of day. I do not consume media at night. And that includes, whether it's television and the news, whether it's reading articles online, whether it's even reading anything that would be considered media. That's why I primarily stay off Twitter. It's like, I don't want to know, because I will not sleep. I have issues with sleep anyway. For me, if I'm going to consume media, it's primarily in the morning or later in the afternoon. And again, that's just me knowing myself and being careful. I do think, though, one problem I see is that people tend to consume media that agrees with their point of view, instead of being open-minded and exposing themselves to all different points of view and respecting other people's point of view. We have become such a closed-minded society, and we've become this ridiculous cancel culture. Again, it's another reason I pretty much stay off Twitter most of the time, with some exceptions. I mean, you say the wrong thing now, and your career can be over, and that's ridiculous.
That's so funny. I was actually about to talk about Twitter in my next question. So social media, of course, like the main ones, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube are great ways to stay in contact with friends, but it also allows for criticism from individuals we may not know well. And things can get out of hand. Take, for instance, Twitter feuds. The matter of importance of these fights range and could even be on the more personal side, yet individuals may feel the need to comment. So this question is you kind of already answered it, but maybe you could elaborate a bit. Sure. How can we keep the good and overcome the bad and the ugly of social media? For instance, maybe do you have any suggestions on how we can motivate others to stay positive?
Well, I do recommend that you limit how many social media channels you're on. So start there and really pick just two that are really your main social media channels. And that's when I just sort of walked back Twitter, because I don't care about it that much. To me, there's far more bad on Twitter than there is good. There's just too much vitriol. It's not that I won't post something occasionally. It's not that I won't check in. But I don't want to spend time on Twitter. I don't find it a good way to keep in touch with people I know. at all. I think it's a great way to actually reach out to total strangers or celebrities. For Twitter is good for that, or journalists. But I don't think it's a good platform for me. With Facebook, I mainly I'm on LinkedIn and Facebook. With Facebook, because I have a business page on Facebook, well, let me go back to this. There has been a rumor going around for, I think, 3 years now that well, not me specifically, but that Andrea Wilson is a hacker. And it's so bad that last year it was called the number one, oh gosh, I think I'm blanking on the word, the number one hoax of all of 2019 was Andrea Wilson as a hacker. And I wrote about it in a blog post a few years ago, and that actually made the whole situation worse. So I like to joke that I've been all over the world as a hacker. And of course I have not, and it's not me, and it's hurt many, many other people, but it really, really, really hurt my coaching business for a long time. And I still, to this day, get comments randomly. Yesterday, a woman shared one of my posts on my Facebook business page, but then called me a hacker. And so I kind of do a combination of, I share my blog posts with people, which clearly outlines what happened, when it happened, and then I'm not a hacker. And or other times I will just hide people's comments if they're nasty. If you have a business page, here's a tip: do not delete people's comments, because they will be notified, and that only stirs up whatever is going on with them. It only stirs up more feelings, more anger. If you hide someone's comments, they don't know their comment is hidden. They can't tell. And that way you've kind of diffused the situation, but they think their comment is still out there for the public, but you know it's not. And so it got so bad at one point that I no longer allow anyone to contact me on my Facebook business page. I mean, that's how bad the messages were getting through Messenger. I don't allow that anymore. Yeah. So I think for me, Facebook is really bad. So I definitely don't want to be on Twitter. I can't even imagine. You guys still on mute?
Oh, yeah, sorry. I was clicking mute and it wasn't working.
That's okay. I'll give you something while we're on this point that I heard that's probably true. Kim Kardashian's Instagram followers, 25% want to be her, like her. 50% are men who want to go out with her, and 25% are people who absolutely hate her. So it's kind of fascinating in a way when you look at these celebrities and you just assume, oh, well, they've got 10 million followers. That doesn't mean 10 million people love them. So.
Right. That's actually so interesting that a great portion of, influencers who are followed by critics, and like that only fuels the despise and the hate towards another person, but also the self-hate that they might feel.
Yeah.
So I think that's very interesting. The next question we have is, what advice would you give yourself for each decade of your life, even the ones you have not lived yet? It's a pretty long question.
Yeah, that's okay. I don't know if I can do every decade. I actually went to this amazing art exhibit once. I want to say it was San Francisco Modern Museum of Art, but because that's one of my favorites, but I'm not sure. And they did this incredible exhibit where they asked people in their 80s and 90s what was their biggest regret in life, or what was the one piece of advice they would give their younger selves. And overwhelmingly, people said, don't worry so much. Do not worry, or don't have regrets. So I would like to think that that's the advice I would give myself. Just worry less, and I would much rather regret doing something and trying than regret not having tried at all. And so that's how I look at regrets. For my 16-year-old self, I would give myself a couple pieces of advice, and I only know this because I've written about it. One, I would tell myself I'm not fat. I was a ballet dancer. I went to charter fine arts school. I had a very demanding, kind of crazy ballet teacher. And I was told I was fat from the time I was 12 and up. And I believed it. And I wasn't. And so that really gave me, body image problems for a long, long time that still to some degree exist today, much better now. But I would tell myself I'm not fat. I would also actually tell myself that I would prepare myself for getting custody of my sister, because it didn't happen, late in life. I mean, I was 22, and I don't want to digress into it, but there were some things that if I had known my sister was going to be diagnosed with this cancer, there were some tests early on that I maybe, if I had known because of the particular cancer she had, if these tests could have been done, it's possible that we could have caught it much earlier. But there were just so many unknowns. So that's the kind of advice that I would give myself.
That's really great advice. To touch on the point of, what you're mentioning, body dysmorphia, I think a lot of girls and some boys today, our age and younger, experience that. And that's just so horrible that you're someone of a higher age than you would say that to you. Like, that would really cause me, I think, a lot of people to internalize it. And then, in this day and age of social media, going out and looking at these girls who are super thin and, maybe it's all photos and, it's not reality. And I think we really need to change the way that we talk to the younger generations about issues revolving around the body. And so the next question we have is, what are some initiatives you are working on now with Cancer U?
Oh, one of my favorites is we're doing an initiative called Share Your Story. And it's an opportunity for patients, survivors, caregivers, even providers who treat cancer to share their cancer story. And it's been really great so far. I mean, no two stories have been even remotely alike. And so we do a Zoom call, and then we take that story, and that becomes content inside of Cancer U's member library. It becomes what we call an elective course. And then we're also going to take that content, pull the audio out, and that's going to be a podcast episode when we launch our podcast in the fourth quarter of this year. But I've really just enjoyed it. And I think it's just a good way for people to share their story. In the end, we all become someone's story. And I also think it's a lot easier many times for people to learn from other people's stories rather than just from a didactic lesson, if you will.
I definitely agree. And that's why it's so great that we're having this opportunity to talk with you, because you have so many stories to tell. So thank you for that. I believe Rachel has the next question.
We got her back. She disappeared on us.
My microphone wasn't letting me unmute. It was very strange. Our next question is, there are lifestyle changes to make for mental health and resilience. Are there actual exercises to do for the mind, like similar to mental push-ups?
Oh, that's a great question. Who asked that? That's an awesome question. Yes, there are. Absolutely. And I wish that I had learned them when I was much younger. Meditation is fantastic. And this is coming from someone who I hated meditation. I should say hated it. I was like, who does this? This is crazy. And I have taught many, many coaching clients to meditate. And I do two kinds of meditation. I do guided visual meditations. And I do those kind of as needed. And I just, lie down and relax. Hypnosis Live is my favorite. Those are my favorite ones. And they have all different kinds of subjects. But then I do silent meditation every day where I just focus on my breathing, and I do 4 minutes. That's it. You don't have to spend 20 minutes or 40 minutes or an hour meditating every day to really quiet your mind. And it's okay if thoughts go in and out of your mind. It takes a long time to train your brain to be quiet. And a gratitude practice is awesome. I do gratitude practice every day, and there are so many ways you can do that. Some people like a gratitude journal where they write it down. Some people like saying it out loud. Some people prefer to do it in the morning. I do it at the end of the day. I actually use an app. It's one of the few apps I use every single day. And I just write down 1 or 2 or 3 things I'm thankful for. Every now and then I have a really bad day and I'll just put, I'm grateful I'm breathing. I mean, that's all I've been. That's okay. But what's beautiful about it is I could scroll back and look and see. And it's almost, just those 1, 2, or 3 sentences every day. It's sort of a story of my life. And I haven't missed a day in 3.5 years for my gratitude practice. And so just those 2 things, meditation and gratitude practice, are a good place to start.
I have never done gratitude practice, but I have struggled on and off with doing meditation. And during the pandemic, I've really picked up on it. And it actually really changes everything, lowers your stress and anxiety. So we have a really interesting question from an audience member. Their name is BWYWB She says, "Hi, thank you so much for speaking to us. I had also lost a loved one to cancer as well. And my question is, how do you separate the negative emotions in the places with strong memories of the person?" And our producer actually says, "Thank you, because this is a great question." He totally agrees with it.
Could you ask them if they would say what negative emotions? I'm going to go with it, but if they could be more specific, that would be great.
Yes, of course.
There are sort of 5 stages of grief. There's anger, depression, bargaining, denial, and acceptance. And they don't go in any particular order, except acceptance is usually last, but not always. And you don't necessarily have all of those. So you have to just go through them. There's not a timeline on grief. And that's the hardest part. And there's no one way to do it. And to give you an example, I really was more than anything else depressed, even suicidal for a few years. And I never actually was angry that my sister died, even though a lot of people around me were. I didn't know who to be angry at. So I had a really hard time being angry. I didn't know, if you're angry, you're usually angry at someone or something. And I didn't know who that person or thing was. So, but 16 years, I think it was, after she died, I was watching a stupid show on Netflix. It was their series finale. And this young woman is walking across the stage, graduating from high school. And then they did this dissolve. And she's walking across the stage, graduating from college. And I was furious for the first time that my sister died. Furious because she was a straight A student. She had a 4.0 GPA. All she could think about was going to college. I mean, she had her life planned pretty much until she was about 23 or 24 years old. I mean, she had everything planned step by step. And one of the hardest things for her during her cancer journey was that she couldn't go back to school in person. She did go back to school, homeschool, but she couldn't go back to school in person. And she was so upset about it. And that stupid TV show triggered me. But I didn't repress that anger. I just let it flow through me. And I was crying, but I mean, they were angry tears. And I could have beaten somebody up in that moment and I would have won no matter how big they were. But I just let it happen. And I haven't been angry since. But it caught me completely off guard to be angry more than a decade later. It really, really, really did. So I think you just have to live those emotions. And this is where having supportive people is so important, because I had more than one person say to me, get over it. She's been gone a year, get over it, move on. You don't want those people in your life anymore.
That's really, really crazy. Oh my God. But yeah, I want to send out love to Adrian right now, thinking about that story. So we did get a response from Bella, and she said memories of the person that makes you miss them. When I visit back to the same place, it does not have the same shine anymore, and it is a bit saddening.
Oh, yeah. I mean, that's going to happen. And that may happen for a long time. I mean, I have memories of my sister, and sometimes I'm still saddened by them. Most of the time now, it's been enough time for me where I'm just really happy. But yeah, I mean, I still get upset. It was difficult for me to read my own book. Let's put it that way. And I wrote it. and when I actually sat down to read the final, finished, published version, because when you're editing, it's not the same as reading it. When I actually sat down to read my own book, I had a hard time reading it because it just, it made me sad. So just allow yourself to be sad. It's okay.
I think that is definitely a great way to cope with anything, just allowing your emotions to flow. I definitely agree with you. We want to thank you so much for all your insight. And for our audience, please check out AndreaWilsonWoods.com as well. She's on Instagram, and at Join Mayshad on Instagram for more inspiring content.
We really appreciate hearing from you today. Thank you so much for coming onto our call.
Yeah, thanks for having me, guys. You did your homework. I am super impressed.